Before I start, just to incentivize you to stay at the end and form some good questions, I've got a stack of 5 bars of green and blacks here for the best question. So my name's Jo Fairley, and I'm a chocoholic, and I'm founder with my husband Craig Sams of Green and Blacks. We just won coolest food brand in Britain for the 7th year in a row, and I'm really thrilled to be at the Skills Show today to inspire you, I hope, on your career journey. Now, I never imagined when I left school that I would one day become a successful entrepreneur. To begin with, I spent a year at college learning office skills like shorthand and typing and a bit of law and commerce, some French, etc. And I went on to work in various offices. Now, I just started by doing general office duties. But I think what I had going for me was that I was always willing to roll up my sleeves and get stuck in. And a few years later, I started on the debut team of a magazine called Woman's World. I have to say I was a junior in the features department, and my job in those days entailed a lot more of kind of making tea for the boss and fetching the editor's dry cleaning than it did interviewing celebrities. But I did work my way up to features assistant and then features editor, and that really did have some high points, actually. I interviewed some Hollywood legends, including Jane Russell and Betty Davis, and various singers like Bob Geldof and Brian Ferry. And I learned a really important skill, which was not to be scared of asking anybody anything, which is a very good quality in a journalist, and was also rather good for helping me get over my natural shyness. And then one day, the boss of my publishing company called me into his office and said, "Jo, I need your help." So I said, "Okay, how can I help you?" And he said, "I'm looking for an editor for Look Now," which was Woman's World's little sister publication. It was a magazine for nice teenage girls, which unfortunately no longer exists. But I said to Terry, "What kind of person are you looking for?" And he reeled off a list of attributes, and jokingly at the end I said, "Well, what you're really looking for, Terry, is someone just like me." And he said, "Yes, I'd like you to start in the morning." So overnight, literally at the age of 23, I became the youngest magazine editor in Britain. And this was completely unknown territory for me, and it was completely terrifying. I was totally nervous the whole month that I would be found out. And let me tell you, I think that that is a very common feeling whenever you're doing something new. So don't be surprised if it happens to you at some point. So my dad, very helpfully, gave me a book of publishing terms, and every time the art editor, for instance, would come in and say, "Do you want this picture bled off?" I'd go, "Yeah, I think that's a really good idea." And then she'd leave the room, and I'd look up in my book of publishing terms, and if I actually wanted to have a border around the picture instead, I'd ring back and say, "Well, actually, Penny, I think maybe I've changed my mind about that." But a funny thing happened at the end of the first month, which is I realized that editing a magazine was a mechanical process. I'd done 1 month, and by the time the second month swung round, I knew how to edit a magazine, the mechanical stuff, and that freed me up to be the creative person that my boss had appointed to that job. So a bit of bluff got me through that first nail-biting month, but that's what it took, and I'm not ashamed to say it. So I edited magazines all through my 20s. After Look Now, I was headhunted to be editor of Honey magazine, which was a well-known fashion magazine. But by the age of 30, I decided I wanted a bit more freedom. I had actually spent most of my 20s, while all my mates were out having fun, in the office. So I'd be the first person there in the morning, and I'd be the last person there at night. And I became a freelance writer, and the real advantage that I brought to that was that I understood exactly how scary it is to be sitting in an editor's chair every month with 200 blank pages to fill. I could listen to a brief, I could deliver on that brief, the right length, nicely laid out, which in those days meant retyping my copy time and again because we did not have word processors then. I never missed a deadline, and I became a very successful freelance journalist. As a result, I wrote for all the glossies. I wrote for for newspapers like the Daily Express and the Times, and I covered an incredibly wide range of subjects, from elephant polo to sumo wrestling via Romanian orphans. It was never dull, I tell you. And I wrote a lot about entrepreneurs, but at that stage, I never really imagined that I would become one myself. Eventually, I was asked to write a column for the women's page of the Times called Ecosphere, and then a green column for that paper. And it was very much about all the green issues that were starting to appear on the agenda. There was everything from Sting and Trudy's Rainforest Ball through to the rather more boring launch of the world's first recycled bin bag. But there was a range of homewares by Paul and Linda McCartney, an aid of charity called ARC. And, you know, some very high-profile figures were doing some great stuff to raise people's awareness of the environment. And personally and professionally, I really rather felt at that point like I'd come home, because when I was 13, a friend gave me a copy of a book called A Shopper's Guide to Saving the Planet. There wasn't much I could do to save the planet in those days, except get my mum to drive her gin bottles to the bottle bank, but it never really left me. And then in 1991, I married Craig Sams, who was founder of a company called Whole Earth Foods, and I did marry him for his peanut butter. And he was for many years chairman of the Soil Association. And one day earlier that year, I'd walked into his office and I found 2 squares of dark chocolate sitting under a bank statement on his desk. So obviously I ate them, as you do when you find chocolate on your husband's desk. And as it exploded on my taste buds, I realized that this was the darkest, yummiest, most delicious chocolate I'd ever eaten. And I said to him, "What are you going to do with it?" And I teased him, you know, "Mr. Whole Foods, what are you doing with chocolate on your desk?" And he said, I can't do anything. It's the world's first organic chocolate, but I can't do anything with it. His company was founded on the principles of no added sugar. But the memory of that chocolate nagged at me, and so I nagged at him, which was slightly high risk because we weren't actually married at that point. But eventually he turned around and said, "Look, if you're so interested, why don't you do it?" Which meant that he could take care of some of the sales and distribution, but basically I had to do the PR and the marketing, and the really big catch was that I had to finance it too, because he didn't have launching a new brand in his budget. So I invested my life savings, £20,000, from selling my house before I moved in with Craig, before we got married, and I did just that. And we lay in bed one Saturday night and came up with a name. Green because we were organic, black because we were the darkest chocolate on the market at the time, and I put an "and" in the middle, and it sounded like we'd been around since 1876. Literally, I knew we had it. Now, with my journalistic background, I took care of all the press and all the high-level sales calls to the supermarkets, which is really stressful, let me tell you, for somebody who doesn't have any kind of sales background. I got lots of coverage for us in the media, and for 9 years I also ran our customer service department, because it's so important for any business, that customer service aspect. I literally had 2 phones on my desk, and I'd be on the phone to the editor of You magazine, and the other line would go, and I'd go, "Hold on, Dee, hello, Green and Blacks," because actually I continued to work as a journalist for the first 9 years of Green and Blacks, because we grew so fast there was no money left over to pay me. It was all tied up in stock. And a huge breakthrough for us, a huge awareness breakthrough, some of the coverage I got, but a huge awareness breakthrough was when we launched this product, Maya Gold, which was the first ever product to carry the fair trade mark in the UK. This helped the company to grow and grow and grow, and it was 9 years before we realized we had to take an investment to get to the next stage. So we sold the brand to Cadbury's in 2005, and since then we've become the first global fair trade brand, and I think that that's probably the proudest achievement of my life. And funnily enough, if you'd told me one day that my company would be successful enough to sell to Cadbury's, I might have been too scared to put one foot in front of the other. But I think that any career, any business, has to be about the journey and not just about the destination. And of course, I'm incredibly proud of what we've gone on to achieve. But I've also gone on to become a serial entrepreneur. For 8 years, we had a bakery in our hometown in Hastings, which we just sold to somebody who wanted to open a chain of bakeries. We opened a 9-room well-being centre. And next year, I have a new venture called the Perfume Society, which I'm launching, which is the first of its kind anywhere in the world. But I thought what might be useful to you guys today is to share some of the other lessons that I've learned along the way and some of my golden rules for success. Everyone has their different motivation for becoming successful. But for me, having a passion for what you do is the most important driver of all. But when it comes to success, trust me, there is no magic formula. Invariably, in my experience, successful people are willing to put in 18-hour days something, happy to roll up their sleeves, probably have trouble switching off even on holiday. And if you want your own business, you have to be the sort of person who works to live rather than lives to work. If you want to be able to close the door on what you do at the end of the day, go and work for somebody else. So back to those success secrets, which I'm often asked about. One is just simply be prepared to work harder than you ever thought possible. Number 2, and I really, really believe this, try to do good while you're doing business, and I think you will be repaid many, many times over. Number 3, have fun. We only live once, so take your sense of humor to work. You know, I love the sound of laughter in an office, preferably not behind me, but you know, I love it when everybody's having a good time. I work very hard to make my staff feel like part of a team, and I really, really admire companies which get their teams involved in some kind of project as part of a corporate social responsibility program, and that might be, you know, getting everybody together to do a bit of guerrilla gardening on a piece of spare land to grow vegetables. It might be decorating a hostel for the homeless. You know, I really like business that has a purpose. And actually, I think that those activities are incredibly bonding for staff, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to build a team that has shared values and not just shared experiences. Point 5, very importantly for me with my journalistic background, has been trying to harness the power of publicity for absolutely everything that I've done. And I should also really importantly point out that Green and Blacks, and just about anything else I've done, has been shaped not by my experience as a business person, because I didn't start as a business person, but it's been shaped by my experience as a consumer. And I think that the one thing that I'm really good at is putting myself in my customers' shoes. And I think it's really important in any business, and one of the key lessons for me is whatever you're doing, ask yourself, as a customer, is this what I would want? So my other advice for all of you is to observe, read, go on learning your whole lives. Never be afraid to put your hand up and ask a question or ask people what they think. But the most important skill I think I've learned is actually listening to my inner voice. Sometimes you have to be quite quiet to hear it. And I do a lot of yoga, and sometimes if I'm very, very good, I meditate. But it just tunes you into your gut feelings about things. And this isn't something that they teach you in school. It isn't something they teach you in college, but it's incredibly important. And all the successful people that I know have worked on listening to their instincts as well as their reason about what will sell, about what's the right step to take next. You know, for you guys, which university or college is the best one for you? And I really don't believe that the success that I have enjoyed is down to luck. I particularly love the quote, "Luck is what you have left over when you've given 100%. And I have that pinned up and various other inspirational sayings on my office wall. And I still find myself sometimes putting in 18-hour days. I can't remember the last time I had a whole Sunday off, but I'm lucky enough to love what I do, so I really can't imagine slowing down at the moment. And today, for us, Green and Blacks is really just like our firstborn baby, you know. Even though we don't own a single share anymore, I don't think I will ever stop caring about it like a protective parent. I just kind of feel like it's been adopted now and it's gone off to university, and I'm rather proud of it. The brand continues to grow beyond my wildest dreams. Craig is president for life, and I'm what's known as a chocolate ambassador, which means have chocolate will travel. We get to go to places like Australia and New Zealand and Finland, etc., to give the band a good boost. And I was involved also, which was great fun, in our strategy for social media, because obviously every brand these days has to have a presence in those. So my time with you is up. I thought I would leave some time for questions at the end so that somebody gets the chance to win this stack of chocolate. Please don't be shy to put your hand up and ask a question. The first press conference I ever went to, my boss made me stand up and ask a very famous bald actor if it was true that bald men were sexier. So I figured that if I could do that at the London Palladium in front of 200 journalists, then you can put your hands up now. So, as you can tell, Green and Blacks has been an amazing adventure. We've gone from that Portobello bedroom where we dreamt up the name to a brand that's worth over £100 million a year, is officially cooler than Prada, and has helped to change the lives of thousands of people in the developing world. And I really don't think that anyone in business today could ask for anything more than that. So I wish you guys great success, but also great fun while you're achieving it. Thank you. So there's a roving mic somewhere. Who's got a question? Who wants to? Okay.
I'd just like to ask, how much chocolate do you actually eat yourself?
I eat it like normal people eat it. I eat it as a treat. Even though we have a whole cupboard of it in the house, I have a couple of squares, maybe at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or if I'm feeling like I particularly need to be rewarded for something. But I don't sit around eating it all day. In fact, it is quite hard when you're coming up with a new flavour, because you have to eat so much chocolate to work out which sample is right. And that sounds like a dream, but actually it's much harder work than you think. There's a question in the front here.
How long did it take the brand to kick off, like in terms of making your first sale?
Do you know what? We were really lucky. Because of Craig's background in the natural food trade, I knew we would get into the natural food trade quite quickly because he had a reputation as an innovator. But I was literally sitting at my desk with those 2 phones about 3 months after we launched, and I got a telephone call from Sainsbury's, and they invited us to submit it for their next product review. So I went home and I said to Craig, hey, it's great, Sainsbury's rang today. And he went, no, it doesn't happen like that. You know, you go knocking on their door for a couple of years and then maybe it opens a crack and you get your foot in, etc. And what had happened, our really lucky break, was Lady Sainsbury had had some of our chocolate at a dinner party and said to Lord Sainsbury, I think you should have this in the shop. So it was amazing. It was 3 months till we were in Sainsbury's. And it really never does happen like that. Young man.
Did you always want to be a journalist?
I didn't always want to be a journalist, actually. My dad was a journalist, and he actually actively discouraged me from being a journalist. But 3 of the 4, well, actually 4 out of 5 of us have ended up with a writing career of some kind. And I love my journalism. I still do my journalism. I'm passionate about it because you get to meet the most extraordinary people. You get to go places that you would never otherwise go in the course of a day or a career. You always know what's happening in the world about 3 months before it actually happens, which actually was really useful, always feeding back into Green and Blacks. And as a career, It's absolutely fantastic. But I kind of ended up in it accidentally through my office abilities. I will say that going to college and learning to be, an office assistant has been invaluable in the rest of my life in terms of being organized, knowing how to plan things, knowing how to get things done. But if you're thinking of being a journalist, go for it. In the front row.
Did you leave journalism when you started Green and Blacks?
No, I didn't. I mean, I'm still a journalist. I just did run those two careers parallel. And as I say, we were working so hard. I worked so hard because I couldn't afford to give up the day job. We could afford to pay Craig a salary, but all of our money kept going into stock, and the company was growing faster and faster and faster. And so there was just no money left over to pay me. So I stayed working, and that's where the 18-hour days quite often came in. Okay, young man?
Did you ever think about running your own business before your husband suggested it?
Did I ever think of owning my own business? No, never did. As I say, I've written a lot about other journalists, as a journalist, about other entrepreneurs. But I also, when I got this opportunity, it was really about the opportunity rather than wanting to be an entrepreneur. And I remembered a postcard that I'd bought in Carnaby Street when I was about 16 years old, of a man on a diving board. And it said, if you don't do it, you'll never know what would have happened if you had done it. And actually, I think if opportunities come along in your life, and actually it almost feels like the risk of not doing something is bigger than the risk of doing it, because you'll always wonder what might have happened, then, that's a really good kind of, I was referencing my inner voice there. And I dived off the diving board and I've never regretted it, Yes.
As your business started to grow, did you feel that you had to change in any way how you approached things? Were you perhaps more of a, in control at the start and then had to learn how to let go a little bit?
Yeah, letting go is always a bit of a challenge for me, actually. It's all very well being a control freak, but you do have to delegate. I've got much better about delegating as things have gone on, but I've always retained control of the bits that I was best at. And I think the key in life is to learn which bits are your absolute skill that really you shouldn't delegate to somebody else, and which are the bits that play to other people's strengths. So, for example, we kept the marketing and PR and the high-level sales functions in-house, but everything else, we kind of outsourced and delegated to other people. And actually knowing which bits to do that with is good. So I think we're probably... So I've got to decide who gets the question now. Gosh. I think I'm going to give it to the young man who's asked me about being a journalist, actually. Because, if go home and write something and use that as your inspiration. That was you. That means you. Well done. Thank you very much.